Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Voices for Change 2.0, the mental health podcast that's changing the discussion one voice at a time, featuring guests that will help end the stigma and keep talking mental health. And now, here are your hosts, Rebecca and Joe Lombardo.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you spending the next hour or so with us in our humble little program. So I'm getting used to her
Opening.
The opening, yeah.
Yeah, we say something about this almost every week. It's us getting used to the new opening because we did darn near 3 years with the other
the first one, yeah.
And it's funny because I can barely remember what that even sounded like anymore.
I just remember the Scooby-Doo drums.
I still don't know what you're talking about when you say that.
I'll have to show you
cover
sometime.
That later.
Yeah, I'll show you that sometime. So, all right. So here's the thing: is I've been kind of reflective lately on aging and getting older and whatnot. I think part of that has to do with the deaths in recent years of some of my musical heroes, most recently Neil Peart from Rush, and a drummer friend of mine posted on Facebook earlier this week a video, and it's a tribute that the U.S. Army Band did for Neil Peart, where they perform the Rush song "Time Stands Still." And I played it for Beck last night. I don't know what her reaction to it was, but I thought they did a beautiful job. You know, and for those that don't know, Neil was the main lyricist for the band, in addition to playing drums. And he always had very poignant lyrics about things, and Time Stands Still is no different. And it's my interpretation of it anyway is it's a song about appreciating life and friendships, relationships, family, over the passage of time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, recognizing that you're getting older and, you know, just relishing the little things, you know, the small moments that you have, because they're never going to come again, you know. And with our niece and our great niece living with us and seeing our great niece, who's going to be 15 months this week, make little strides, you know, starting to walk and understanding language and different things like that, shapes and colors and stuff.
And she's gotten down that if she laughs,
we laugh.
Even if she's faking, we laugh at her. So then she keeps doing it.
Yeah, we
have a whole video of her, and then we all laugh, and then she, and it was absolutely priceless.
It's adorable. It really is. But, you know, it took me a step back hearing the song, and especially hearing the Army Band's version of it, because it helped me, and I hadn't listened to the song in a long time, but it helped me realize that song at 45 years of age has a completely different meaning for me than it did 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it almost drove me to tears because it really hit home so much with me on, you know, that we're getting older and you know, I always have appreciated every moment that I've had with you, babe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but especially now, after hearing that, after losing people that we've lost in life and everything, I'm just grateful that I get to spend the rest of my days with you.
I'm grateful too, babe.
And I'm grateful for the last 18 years.
And that band did a really nice job with the song. I'd never heard it before, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but as far as I could tell, they did a really nice job with the song, and it was very poignant.
Yeah. So, so I guess the only thing I'm trying to say is those that you love and those that love you, if you see them today, give them an extra long hug, give them a kiss, tell them that you love them for no reason, just that you do. Try to appreciate the little things. You know, we go to concerts and whatnot, and everybody's holding up their cell phone and trying to get video of what's going on stage, you know, and we've stopped doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more just trying to live in the moment, trying to appreciate.
Yeah, it's like everybody spends so much time trying to take pictures and video of stuff when they're not even fully getting
the experience.
The experience of what they're doing because they're so busy trying to take pictures.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm a photography buff a little bit, and I have a nice camera and everything, but I don't feel the need to, you know, take a picture of every living, breathing thing that I do.
Right. You know, so there's something to be said for just living in the moment, you know, taking that breath, appreciating what's in front of you, you know. So that's my soapbox for the day.
And that will lead us into our guest for the day.
Yes.
She's a new friend, I guess we could say.
Yeah.
We haven't been talking for very long, not as long as some of our other guests, and I believe she approached me when I put out that we needed a guest to fill in for another, and hello, are we still there?
Are we still here, Scott? Well, let's keep talking like we're still here. We keep hearing this weird beep, so okay, yeah, cool. We're still here. Sorry about that.
Sorry, guys. We heard a beep and a click, so we got worried that our connection was bad. But so anyway, this new friend of ours, she approached me about coming on the show, and I took a look at her Twitter profile and her website, and I was really impressed with her the way she tells her story and the positive aspects of what she's been through, how she kind of turns it around and turns it into something funny that people can really relate to. So we are really glad to have with us today Alisa Zipursky.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you all this morning.
We are so glad to have you. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. I forgot to ask before the show started, where are you in the country, Alisa?
I am in Washington, D.C. It is a cold but sunny day here in D.C.
Okay, cool. So you didn't have to get up super crack of dawn early to be with us, which is good.
Unfortunately, which is not a cute look for me. I am not a morning person. My mom says, who I believe is listening, hi Mom, that our family stayed together because we knew not to speak to each other at the breakfast table. I come from a family of not morning people, so I'm living on the right coast for my particular personality for sure.
Your mother is wise.
Yeah. Hi, Mom.
Yes.
Hi, Mom. So that's awesome. And in DC, that's exciting. I've been to DC.
I've never been.
We drove through it, picking up Katie that time.
Oh, that was so long ago.
I know.
I barely recall.
I recall the traffic. Holy hell.
Yeah. I haven't had a car in many years. Unfortunately, don't drive in DC. But I grew up in the suburbs in Bethesda, Maryland, and have been back in D.C. As an adult for about the last 10 years or so. And so it is home. It is a always interesting place to be. And there's a whole sort of subculture of, the dominant D.C. political world. And then there's also the other part of D.C. that's filled with lots of creative, amazing people, artists, writers, activists who are doing fun and interesting things. So I'm very lucky to have sort of found my people in this city.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool because you hear about when it comes to creative stuff, you hear about New York and you hear about LA and Chicago and Nashville, but hearing about other cities that you wouldn't normally imagine, like DC. You think of DC and it's like you said, it's political. You don't conjure up images of poets and musicians and whatnot.
Yeah.
And
we have a really beautiful tradition of it. I mean, Duke Ellington is from here. If you want to take it all the way back to sort of
wow.
Black Broadway, which is what we called what the U Street corridor is now called. But the history, especially of Black artistry in the city, is really incredibly robust and awesome. But yeah, it's funny because even within this city that is a bubble, I live in my own bubble, and I had to go to the doctor one morning, and the doctor's on K Street, which is where, all the lobbyists and this, that, and the other are. And it was in the morning, and I took our subway, the Metro, and it was, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I saw all the commuters and everyone wearing like men in ill-fitting suits and backpacks, that's like the look, and then women in Ann Taylor that they definitely resent having to wear all on the subway together. And I was like, God, I forgot this part of living here. I live in my own separate bubble from this. I forgot about, the 9-to-5 political misery and the really miserable uniform. The aesthetic of it is just like really, it's not a cute look. But but yeah, it's a whole other world. But I have found my people, and I love my people, and I love this city.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And I have been on the Metro.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that what that song's about?
No, I think that the song is having to do with the one in Paris.
Oh, I'm really dating myself.
You are incredibly dating yourself. Alisa, do you know what song Beck is talking about?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I didn't think so. It's a very old song,
What was it?
Berlin.
Berlin, right.
Yeah. It's an 80s band called Berlin, and you might remember them for
It must have been Love, right? That's them?
No,
that was
that's Roxette.
Oh,
no,
shoot.
Berlin.
Okay, then I really don't know.
Yeah, Berlin did the Take My Breath Away from the Top Gun soundtrack. That's Berlin. But they had another song called The Metro. Very 80s sounding, very mid 80s, lots of synthesizers and stuff, and we are old.
Indeed.
So it's a cool tune. Check it out sometime. But yeah, and it's funny because I was probably in DC when that song was out, because it was like 1986. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm old. I know. I was 12.
I was 2 years from being ready to be out in the world at that point. So.
Oh my God, you're
young.
young.
I was an 88 baby. Yeah.
Oh my God. I was.
That was my first year high school.
Yeah, I was in middle school in '88. Going right back to what I originally talked about with Time Standstill, and just
exactly, everything circles around.
Wow.
Well, let's get to our agenda for the day, shall we?
Yeah, before I start getting whiter hair in my beard than it already is.
All right. Oh, I thought you were going to go.
Oh, no, I thought you were going to.
Okay.
We are a mess.
Yeah.
So.
It's all right. It's us. We're honest people. We tell people the truth and show the weird sides of us along with the not so weird sides of us. So that's kind of, I think, what draws people to us.
I think it's my big boobs.
Oh, you're doing it again this week, aren't you?
You know, it's been a long week. Don't judge. All right, you're gonna get bad jokes. You're gonna get stupid jokes, and that's part of my charm. That's part of why you married me.
Yes, dear.
That's why you tolerate me for 18 years.
All right. So, Alisa, we usually like to start off with one particular question, and let us know if you feel comfortable answering this. But where does your mental health journey begin?
Oh, what a good question. I think my mental health journey really began when I was first diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which I now recognize as complex post-traumatic stress disorder, when I was 20 years old. And I had experienced a death of a chosen parent, and that trauma of that death triggered that sort of was a second trauma that triggered a primary trauma of my childhood. And so I'm a child sex abuse survivor. I was harmed by my father. For your listeners, I'm not going to describe my abuse that I experienced, just sort of as a content warning there. But we'll reference that this happened to me. But so when I was first diagnosed with PTSD in my grief, when I was 20 years old, I was also processing for the first time what had happened to me as a child. And I didn't know it at the time, but that's an incredibly normal and common way to process, especially childhood sexual abuse, which is I was experiencing another trauma that sort of revealed this other trauma that had been there and sort of lying dormant for a really long time. And I was in college. It was truly the middle. So I graduated in 4 years, and it was the middle of the summer between my sophomore and junior year. So you could draw sort of a perfect line in my college experience of having lived without trauma, and then, or sort of knowingly living without trauma, to living with trauma and grief for those other 2 years. I spent a lot of time on college campuses working with college students, and especially those that are sexual violence survivors. And it is so interesting for how many of us college, those years, those early 20s are really triggering time where we're out of the house and we're safe enough to really be processing things that happened to us in our childhood, often for the first time. And so that's for me really where my mental health journey, where I think I would describe it beginning was with that trauma bringing up and really starting to process what had happened to me as a kid.
And we've talked about this before, where it seems like that age range, the I don't know, 18, 19, 20 area is where a lot of people start to experience their symptoms for the, stronger than usual, and end up having to seek help in some way. It seems like almost everybody we talk to talks about, if it wasn't first thing when they were a little kid, age 9 or 10, then it's out of high school and on their way into college that they start experiencing the symptoms.
Yeah, it seems like almost a going hand-in-hand thing with the process of puberty, kind of.
Yeah.
All these other hormones and stuff start coming into play. You're growing hair in weird places and whatnot.
Well, that's not 18, 19.
No, that's younger.
Yeah.
But, it's that whole puberty section is a huge process. And at some point in there, you know, whatever's going on with you physically, there's something that has to happen to you mentally. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, yeah, I think the mental part of it kind of manifests itself more on the back end of it, you know, when you are 18, 19, 20,
mm-hmm.
you know. Also going along with what Alisa said about, you know, you're on your own for the first time, you're in college, you know, you don't have that shelter of being at home, you know, you're an adult, you know, and you're facing very adult things sometimes for the first time, you know, and that can be very overwhelming. That in and of itself is traumatic, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, and I might turn that on its head a little bit, and I think that that's really true for a lot of people. For a lot of us who grew up with trauma in our families, it's actually leaving the house or leaving is when we are actually first feeling safe. So for a lot of us, we're experiencing safety for the first time and leaving. You know, with the statistics with childhood sexual abuse, it's 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys experience sexual violence before they're 18 years old. And of that, about half of the time they're harmed by somebody else who's also a minor, who's also under 18. But for the other half, when they're harmed by an adult, 80% of the time that adult is a parent. So there is this unspoken epidemic of sexual violence that's happening in our homes and happening to us in our childhood. And I think for those of us, the millions of us that have experienced that, sometimes it's, you know, it's leaving the home is actually when we're experiencing a lot of safety, and, you know, our brains have this incredible capacity to protect us from things that are harmful or threatening to us. And a lot of times I think when we leave the house and we're stabilized somewhere else, our brain gets the signal like, it's okay now to start processing some of them. And so I think that, you know, I see that just, you know, in my own story, but in the story of so many other child sex abuse survivors. And at the same time, it's also like a very unsafe time, right? Like you have the safety of being out of the homes, but also, you know, especially if you're in college campuses have an epidemic of sexual violence and other forms of violence on their campuses too. And so it is both like the safety of being away and the lack of safety of these dangerous spaces that can just be so damn triggering, just so damn triggering.
Yeah,
definitely.
Exactly. What made you decide to start a blog?
I started healinghonestly.com a little over 3 years ago because I was in a place in my healing where I was 27 years old, and I felt like I was really finally then coming to terms with being a childhood sexual abuse survivor and what had happened to me. So I was from age 20 to 27 was me really it just to like, if you're out there and you are a child sex abuse survivor and you are sort of in it and trying to figure out your relationship to what happened to you. I mean, it took me 7 years to be able to confidently and comfortably identify as a childhood sexual abuse survivor. So at 27, when I was there and in a certain part of my healing, I was looking for support, and I felt like everywhere I looked online, I was getting one of two sort of responses. I was either getting like all this clinical information written from psychologists and researchers and academics, and it was all about how I was like totally screwed, and how those of us who experienced childhood sexual abuse were like fated to these lifetimes of all these medical problems and all this stuff. And I was just like, I don't need to hear about how, like my percentage of likelihood that I'm going to like have cancer over somebody else who like this didn't happen to. This thing that I had like no control over happening to me. Like this is not helpful to me, right? Like this is
right.
I just felt like I was like, it was almost like I was learning that I was a childhood sexual abuse survivor, and I was like, damn, like, does this mean like I'm just sort of screwed? And I felt like, so there's all this like academic literature out there that just like tells me all the things that are wrong with me. And then on the other side, there was like some survivor stuff out there, but I just really didn't resonate with it. It felt, like there were a lot of, at the time, like Instagram-y platitudes and quotes and sort of pseudo wellness, like take these 7 steps and you're going to be healed, and also drink all this green juice and like namaste, and that like really didn't feel like me either. I was coming to terms of realizing that like 2 things were true at the same time, which is I was a young person interested in having a healthy sex life and a big, beautiful career and being a good friend and having fun and drinking tequila and watching Netflix and just being like bold and alive, and that my trauma was impacting every aspect of my life. And I just felt like there wasn't really a place to talk about both of those things being true at the same time, that somehow either one negated the other. And so I just felt like maybe I could put this out in the world about being a young person trying to live a full and vibrant life while healing from sexual trauma, and that maybe other people are asking the same questions as me. And so I started healing honestly, that just writing stories about using my own personal life with anecdotes and a healthy dose of humor. And it's really amazing. Over the years, it's grown 65,000 readers, which is really amazing, from all over the world. And all just like wanting to talk about the things that have just felt too scary and inaccessible for us, but our everyday lives.
Wow.
That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one other thing that I've noticed too. I've noticed it going back to when Beck started her blog years ago now.
2013.
Yeah. Everybody I think that we've talked to that has done what you've done, Alisa, starting a blog, telling your story, putting it out there. And this revelation just hit me as you were explaining it, is that everyone that's done that is doing it because they're trying to fill this niche that they notice nobody else has filled. You said yourself, you went out, you saw clinical things saying this is, your ass is going to fall off or something. And, or you find all this other stuff that maybe, it works for other people, the namaste, and you're like, namaste going over here. But for you, you're like, this is my reality. This is what I'm putting out. This is how I'm feeling about things. And, you're seeing a very, I think, positive response from it, having 65,000 people all over the world reading your words, and it resonates with them. It's filling a hole that other people share. They've got that same hole, and being brave enough to put your story out there is just awesome. So well done, you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an extraordinary experience. The part that always, even though it's only been a couple of years, that it just makes me feel like my life has changed so dramatically from doing this work is that when I started, I did not know any other childhood sexual abuse survivors openly when I started writing. And while it's really amazing to hear from people in India and Australia and Chile and Austria, like truly all over the world, who are like, hey, I totally relate to what you're going through. And while that's like really amazing and beautiful, what was so overwhelming, especially in the first like 6 months to year, was learning that I had been surrounded by childhood sexual abuse survivors my whole life and didn't know it, and that so many people were experiencing the same things as me, and I mean intergenerationally, not just sort of my friends, but my friends' parents, family members of mine, people in their 70s and their 80s, people who had passed on, who had all experienced childhood sexual abuse too, and had been so silenced through that experience. And so, which is what is so wild to me now, because now I feel like my life is so full of other survivors. But when I started this work, part of me was hurting this because I didn't know other people like me and other people who were experiencing this. And, this work that I do stands on the back of, and it's possible because of the work that so many people before me have done to break open the conversation around childhood sexual abuse and being harmed by the family. I think about people like Aisha Shahida Simmons, whose anthology just came out this fall called Love with Accountability, that was all about people in the Black diaspora and how they who are child sex abuse survivors, and how they're holding people accountable in a way that doesn't use the criminal justice system for the harm that's been caused. And she's been doing this work as a survivor for decades. And I think about, Sylvia Rivera, who was one of the first people to throw a stone at the Stonewall riots. And she was an open childhood sexual abuse survivor. And she and Marsha P. Johnson, started building a house for other queer LGBTQ children of color who were a lot of them leaving, that trying to escape the sexual abuse that they were experiencing. And and so I've learned my history over doing this work, but I feel so lucky to get to share in my own way, in my own style, in my own words, and connect with people who have the same sort of sensibility. But I very much do this work standing, on the shoulders of so many people who have come before me, who have been fighting to have visibility and support for child sex abuse survivors.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, at this point, we're going to take a little break. I wish we had the legal clearing to play Time Stand Still, but we don't. So instead, we're going to listen to Trevor Page, and the song is titled Afraid.
We'll see you on the other side.
We will see you on the flip.
Give him blue. We don't want him confused, and we don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. Stand up straight, 'cause boys shouldn't act that way. I'm sorry, kid, some things will never change, but that's all that I wanted to do. Now I understand that you were the one who was afraid. You told me that I should be ashamed, and so I told myself the same thing. Just be a man and swallow my pride deep inside. I try to forgive the way you behave, because I know you are afraid. How could this happen to me? A cosmic joke existentially. Maybe I'll wake up from this nightmare. Oh, praying that it all goes away, hoping that this phase will fade. I don't really think I can handle this anyway. No, love is all that I wanted from you. But now I understand
Welcome back to Voices for Change 2.0. I'm Joe. She's Rebecca. She's cute as a button. Look at her. Just look at her. She's so cute.
Nobody can look at me. Stop that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I forgot. Yeah, radio. Picture her in your mind, if you will. And on the line, we have the lovely and talented Alisa Zipursky.
Hi.
Hi.
It was funny. I'll tell you a little trick of the trade. I was trying to type out the information for the show on Twitter, and I had spelled your name, misspelled your last name on our calendar, our desk calendar. So I went and I saw what you wrote, and then I had to go over to the other side of the room to write it down. And the whole time I'm going, zip, purse, ski, zip, purse, ski.
That's exactly right.
All the way across the room out loud, I said it to nobody.
I didn't
That's
know she did
perfect. Yeah, I grew up hearing a lot of Alyssa instead of Alisa, and it took me longer than I care to admit to get to the age where I was like, under no uncertain terms am I going to let somebody call me the wrong name and not correct them anymore. And yet, I've had the same woman cutting my hair for 11 years, and she'll still call me Alyssa, and it's just like too much time has passed. She does such a great job. I can't risk this relationship. I don't trust anyone else with my hair. Like, Nicole can call me Alyssa. She's the only one, but she can call me Alyssa.
That's funny.
Yeah, when my parents were alive, they were the only ones allowed to call me Becky.
Oh, there you go.
There's nothing that grinds my gears more than being called Becky. Oh, my gosh.
18 years of marriage, I've never called her Becky.
Smart.
Yes.
That's why it is 18 years.
That's why it is 18 years. Oh, man. So, I feel like we've answered a few of these. What do you want to jump in on? I'm sure probably should have established this while we were taking our break. That would have been a good idea.
So have you had an overall positive experience with sharing your story?
Yes, definitely. I know that the internet is a dark and scary place. The internet thus far has been very kind to me. Thank you, internet. It's been really remarkable. It's been really remarkable to feel so connected to people across so many different barriers, and to know how not alone I am in the way that I feel and what I experience. And I mean, I should definitely say, I think that there is, especially right now, a tremendous amount of, some of it intentional, a lot of it unintentional, pressure on sexual violence survivors to be public and to share our stories. And a lot of us those of us that are public get sort of exalted in this way and like called very courageous and heroic. And I know from other survivors that can have this unintended consequence of making them feel like, oh, I should tell my story publicly, or if I'm not sharing it publicly, like somehow I am less courageous. And I think it's really important to talk about like that being a sexual violence survivor is just like waking up in the morning and deciding to like just wake up. Like that takes a lot of courage, and that's sort of full stop. For me, in being public and sharing my story was very much because that was totally aligned with what I needed for my healing. Like, it made me feel safer to be public than to not be public. Like, I made this very intentional decision. I was going to use my full name, Alisa Zipursky, that, like, when you Googled me, that you were always going to see this about me. And it made me feel safe to know that I could never be forced to hide this part of myself anymore. And that was like very healing for me. And somebody could have gone through like truly the exact same thing as me and come to a different conclusion about what was best for them or for their healing. And that's like so valid and so good. And so I'm careful to, like for me, being public has been awesome. in terms of how connected it's made me feel to other survivors, how healing it's been for me to be able to speak my truth and not feel like I have to hide away this part of myself anymore. But that's only because, like, that is very specific and true to me and my healing, and everybody's healing journey is very, like, individual to each of us. And so I like to sort of offer that as well. But in sharing my story, it's been interesting because often it's the things that I share that I feel like are most potentially isolating, like the things that I write that I think, oh God, is anybody going to read this and be like, I can relate? Or am I going to be like the only one out here standing being like, anyone? Bueller? That those are the things that people like, that resonates most deeply. And that's been like a really surprising part of this work. So like, for example, in like May of 2017, I wrote this story that just felt sort of like this confession that it was called, what did I call it? Something like what it's like to remember what you don't remember. And it was about how I have non-narrative memories of my childhood sexual abuse. I don't have clear memories of what happened to me that have like a beginning, a middle, and an end. I have like what are called like body or somatic memories, like flashes and nightmares and visions and physical memory. My body is when it is triggered, is physically going back to a place of trauma and abuse. And I felt like I was writing this being like sort of this, okay, I have been telling you all I'm this like quote unquote real survivor, but I'm not this quote unquote real survivor because like I can't remember clearly what happened to me. And that made me feel really like invalidated in my survivorship. So I wrote this story. And then 6 months later, the Harvey Weinstein story broke, and my story went sort of like viral, and like 6 months after writing it. And 2 years later, it is still like 90% of my web traffic is people Googling and ending up on that story. It is without fail overwhelmingly what I hear most about from other survivors, that they're Googling like cannot clearly remember my childhood sexual abuse, or body remembers, mind doesn't remember, and ending up on my story. And turns out there are millions of us that are being triggered by the world around us and trying to make sense of what we're going through, and our bodies are telling us that we've been through trauma and our minds are not as clear about it. And this has like been studied a lot scientifically, and there's, all the science supports all of this. But it was so interesting because it was a story that I like wasn't even sure I was going to write, because I felt like, oh my God, it's going to be really isolating, and people are going to be like, I can't relate to this woman at all. What the hell is she talking about? And it turns out it is like the thing that people most are like hungry to talk about and connected with, which just like shows the power of stigma and destigmatizing work.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that goes right into our next question, which is, what steps do you feel we need to take going forward when attempting to destigmatize childhood sexual abuse? Thank you.
Oh boy, there are so many. And so many amazing people doing really, really incredible work around this. So my friend Ignacio Rivera, whose project is the HEAL Project, they're completely reconceptualizing the way we talk about, the way we think about sex education and the way we talk about sex with kids, and what like holistic sexuality education would look like, and teaching children about things like body autonomy and feeling safe in their bodies and what does that mean, and doing it at much earlier ages than we commonly have these conversations. Ignacio is a child sex abuse survivor too, so it's survivor-led work, and it's amazing. And so they're like talking about it from the standpoint of like sex education and talking with kids, which is like so amazing and so important. And And then Aisha, who I told you about before, is working on it in terms of like talking about it in the way that we hold our family members accountable, and how child sex abuse actually like impacts the entire family and the entire community. And we all need to be talking about that. It's not just something that happens between a child and an adult. Like, it impacts all of us, and we need to be talking about that, because a lot of us are also like complicit in the harm that is caused, and we need to have the capacity and the work and the space and the language to be able to talk about that. And then there are people like Alisa Zipursky, whose project Mirror Memoirs, they interviewed 60 LGBTQ child sex abuse survivors of color to learn from their leadership and to center the most marginalized survivors and learn from their work about how we can end this like epidemic of sexual violence. So there's so many people in the field doing like really exciting, amazing work. And it takes sort of everyone from all of these different angles, from all of these different foci to have these conversations. But the fact of the matter is that child sex abuse still is considered this family issue. Incest is considered a family-based issue. You can see about how Woody Allen is still like, it's still acceptable to work with him. And a lot of people are like, the issue with him and Dylan Farrow is like a family issue, and not that the family actually like that that it's happening in every community across the world, across the country, that there's no sort of culture or community for which this is not being impacted. And we need to be honest about this happening. I think people are so uncomfortable talking about childhood sexual abuse, understandably so, but and then when we do, it seems like the only cases that get, amplified are often people for whom the person isn't quite as close as a parent is. Maybe they're a coach or a doctor or a religious leader or a teacher, and those stories matter and they're really important, but statistically, it's most likely that it's going to be somebody in your family, and specifically a parent, that's harming you. And it's so uncomfortable for people to talk about, but we have to talk about that. And we have to be able to be open and honest about what's going on in people's lives, because we're not doing anybody a service by pretending that that this isn't the lived reality of millions of us in the United States. And so I think that those are really, important conversations, but also really importantly, we have to be talking about who is being harmed. I think that still, even as far as we've come in talking about sexual violence and sexual trauma, we still think about sexual violence in this unidirectional way, that of stories like my own, where I was a cis girl who was harmed, or like a cis straight girl who was harmed by a cis man. And we still think, I think a lot about sexual violence in those terms. We talk about women and girls, but child sex abuse, 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused as well. And we really need to talk about that. Queer and trans presenting kids, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, are at a really high risk of childhood sexual abuse. In their 2012 study, they found that a child assigned male at birth that's like femme or gender nonconforming presenting is 6 times more likely to be sexually abused than their like gender conforming peers. And we need to be talking about that too. Like we have to be honest about who's being harmed, and also expand sort of who we think about when we think about survivors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Do you want to ask that? Or?
Go ahead, honey.
Okay. So what are some best practices if a friend or loved one confides in you about being a sexual violence survivor?
Great question. This is actually something that I wrote about with my best friend for Teen Vogue. So you can go on my site and you can see a link. So me and my bestie Kate, we wrote about being a good friend to a sexual violence survivor and give some tips and some strategies. I think that the most important thing is to honor the survivor and honor whatever it is that they think is best for themselves. Like, the survivor is going to be the expert in their own safety. So they may make decisions that you may think that, like, you might have made a different decision, whether it comes to reporting or having a relationship with the person who harmed them, or steps that they want to take. And it's really important to honor, like, the survivor is the expert in themselves and in their own safety. And the best thing that you can do is support them through that. And I think also recognizing that the survivor, no matter who they are, is going through so many layers of rape culture that tell them that their pain isn't real and that their pain doesn't matter. We hear these messages throughout our lives, and then we often hear them also from people who matter to us. So I think consistently communicating to them that their pain is real and that their pain matters, and that you see them and that you validate and affirm that is really, really important, because there's just so much going on within us that make us feel like, for whatever reason, we're not a quote-unquote real survivor. I would also say mirror and use the language that the survivor is using. So if they're not calling it child sex abuse and they're not calling it rape, then, call it what they're calling it. Let them choose the language of how they talk about what they've been through. And I would say also recognize that the way trauma works is it impacts us so much further than the initial harm that we've been through. Like, this is the whole, like, why it's so awful for trauma survivors, and people are like, it was a long time ago, you should be over it. And you're like, that's cute, but that's not how trauma works. Right. Trauma is actually, like, in a lot of ways more about brain damage than it is about like a mental illness. But that's another conversation. But anyway, so trauma impacts you for, like, a hell of a long time, like way longer than the initial harm. And so being a good friend also just means, like, being there in it, like, months after, years after, honoring that, like, everybody's healing process is going to be different. And just to be, like, a super solid person through that whole experience is so valuable, so important. And if your friend, this is the advice that I give on college campuses all the time, talking about friendship is, like, the most common question I feel like that I hear from survivors on campus and the people who love them. Something my best friend Kate does to me, and when I'm having a really bad day, she just asks me this amazing question. She just asks, well, what's something kind you're doing for yourself today? And it just automatically puts me in the position of reminding me that I need to care for myself and that I'm worth taking care of, and that what I'm going through is worthy of taking a moment to do something kind for myself. And then she holds me accountable to it, right? So she'll check in and be like, how is, you eating Thai food and watching Netflix going? And it's just little things like that when the journey is sort of ongoing and there's no, like, point of, like, finite where you're like, I'm healed. That to have a friend be able to do that with you is super awesome. And the last thing I'll say is about that is, and this is not talked about enough, I think, is, like, yeah, be there with them in the darkness and the, like, really nitty gritty of it. Stand beside them, honor them, but also celebrate the good stuff with them, because there are so many beautiful and awesome and important moments in healing, and having somebody who wants to celebrate that with you is so badass. Like, if something that used to be, like, super triggering to you now is something that you were able to experience and stay in your body and stay safe, like, celebrate that. That's awesome. And so I think that that's a really important part of being a friend too.
Awesome. Very good advice there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are winding down here to the end of the show, but we did want to ask you about, what's coming next for you and about your social media, where people can find you online.
For sure. So So please come visit healinghonestly.com. I have all the fun things there, all of the articles, lots of writing, lots of good fun links and things like that. And what's next for me is a lot of my work right now is working on college campuses, talking about healing from sexual trauma and rape culture on campuses. So you can follow along with my work on there if you are on campus or part of an organization and looking, especially coming up with April with Sexual Assault Awareness Month. For speaker, hit me up, let me know, we can chat. But so lots of fun time on campuses is what's in store for me next. But follow along on healinghonestly.com. Right now we're doing a lot of work on the lie of false memory syndrome, which is a lie. And so you can read more about that there. And also you can follow me on Instagram at Alisa Zipursky, ALISA. Zipursky. You will see awesome photos of my puppy Franklin, my also my employee. He won Employee of the Year last year for Healing Honestly, and I'm on Twitter at Healing Honestly.
Okay, perfect.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much for being on with us today. I think we've had a really good conversation.
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's so great to talk with you all and to be here with you. What a beautiful way to start the weekend.
Well, thanks.
All right. Well, stay on the line for just a minute, and we are going to be leaving you guys until next week. But until then, listen to A Treat for Joe.
You're still on the air for a few seconds to talk over the song, so we can talk over this song.
Okay.
Whatever it is that Scott has cooked up to play.
I don't know who the singer is of the show, but it's called A Treat for Joe.
No, this is...
Oh, I understand. He's saying it is a treat for you.
It's for me. Oh, thanks, Scott. Guys, this is Time Stand Still, and it's the U.S. Army Band's version of it.
To pass an evening with a drink and a friend. I let my skin get too thin. I'd like to pause, no matter what I pretend. Like some pilgrim who learns to transcend, learns to live as if each step was the end. Not looking back, but I want to look around me now. See more of the people and the places that surround me.